Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I have to say, being the final speaker at the end of a full day can be kind of a tricky proposition. But I have one thing going for me, and that's that we're mostly going to be looking at cartoons. There's not a single bullet point on any of my slides. I want to talk today about mindset. You've been hearing a lot about technology, and it's incredibly exciting. What I want to talk about is the mindset that I think we have to have as marketers to take full advantage of that technology. And I've learned a little bit about you. I had a chance to look at the Lithium award submissions, so I have a bit of a feeling of who you are in the room. But I have to say, this gave me the best impression of all. How many of you saw this posted on the Lithium community? Okay. So we put a little caption contest out there. It's a really great way to get a feel of the room, and I have to say there are a lot of good things came out of this. I want to share a few of my favorite captions that came out of you, basically, out of the power of the community. What did you think we meant when we said you will be stripped of everything if you don't pass Community Manager Certification 2? Brad, Burning Man was fun and all, but HR would love for you to start wearing pants again. We're putting you on a tech detox for Link 16. Apparently you were caught taking selfies with developers. Welcome to Lithium. Get me a coffee and you'll unlock the furniture level, but you'll have to get people to like you to get your pants back. The CEO has been binge watching Naked and Afraid and thought this would be a great motivational exercise. Well, you did say you needed less resources now that you have Lithium's products. By the way, you need to make that ball pen last the entire fiscal year. You can borrow my underwear, but I draw the line at my chair. We had a couple more. Deliver a measurable ROI and you get back your pants. We'll talk about everything else later. We're glad you're here, Tarzan, but we need to discuss business casual. And the last two, don't worry, it's all on the cloud. And finally, and this is the one we picked as a winner and who will receive a signed print of this cartoon at the Lithium booth after, I fear you misinterpreted being more transparent with customers. So well done, everyone. It's really fun to see the creativity in the room and talk about the power of the community. And like I was saying, there's never been a better time in history to work in marketing and to connect with our own communities as brands. There's never been a better way to connect with communities in terms of the technologies, the platforms, the tools that are now available. But I think sometimes what happens is that the mindset of marketing hasn't quite caught up to the technology. And we as marketers can get so excited about what's next, we forget about what we're gonna do with it. What's the big campaign idea? We're going digital. Facebook, YouTube, a mobile app, Pinterest. What are we gonna do in all those channels? I don't know, we'll figure it out later. And it's that I don't know, we'll figure it out later part of the dynamic that I want to talk about. I think in a lot of ways, we're in an awkward adolescence of technology adoption. This subway has no internet access, but that won't stop us from asking you to scan the QR code in this ad. If you've ever seen a QR code on the side of a moving bus, as if somebody's going to be so inspired by the creative, they're going to take their phone out and chase the bus down the street, get the QR code, and then ultimately look at their phone and probably get a website that's not optimized for mobile. That, I feel like, is where we are. The technology is there. It's incredibly exciting. But unless we bring the right mindset, we're not going to take full advantage of it. Here's a poor guy sleeping and his phone's going. It's going. Finally wakes him up. Having trouble sleeping? $5 off nighttime liquid caps. I think my Nest smoke alarm is going off. Google AdWords just pitched me a fire extinguisher and an offer of temporary housing. And I feel like in optimizing the funnel, we sometimes focus so much, we have the wrong mindset there too. Do whatever drives the most traffic, like listicles about cats. Relentlessly harass them with marketing automation. Trick them with a bait and switch offer, and then hope they promote your brand to all their friends. And the trouble is, you can't take an experience that's not fundamentally worth sharing and then just get people to become a community around it. If you can't take something like this and get people excited about it. Here's a guy, typical situation, flight canceled. Honey, just be patient. The hotel brand I'm loyal to isn't optimized for mobile. Honey, honey, she said to say she left you for another brand. Google had an interesting quote I heard recently that people are more loyal to their need in the moment than they are to any particular brand. And I think that encapsulates a lot of where I think we are. They describe the importance of needing to find micro moments that matter in our consumers' lives, and to be there and to use technology to be there in a way that's really meaningful. In the case of the guy in the hotel, the guy in the airport, he's missing an opportunity because he's trying to connect with the hotel brand and he can't. And I feel like sometimes those are the opportunities we most need to optimize for. So here's a quick example of an unexpected case study that's doing this. Red Roof Inn, it's not exactly the Marriott. They compete against big hotel chains that have far bigger resources and deeper pockets, and they can't afford to do it the typical way. But they looked at that exact insight of a guy stuck in an airport and his flight was canceled. And rather than do a typical ad buy, which would be prohibitively expensive because all the big hotel chains were doing it, they instead developed an API to figure out to tie weather data, canceled flight data, and develop an ad buy based on that data so they can do geo-targeted ads to people who are exactly in that mindset, who are exactly in that framework. So if you're stuck at O'Hare, your flight's canceled, you're getting a geo-targeted ad. And that, I think, is an example of ways that brands can use the latest technologies to actually outcompete bigger brands with deeper pockets, and to do it in a way to use technology in the right way because they have the right mindset. And ultimately, ending up with a position like this is an example of one of these moments that matter. These two people sitting down, surrounded by all the paid media in the world for one of the brands, and someone saying, I'll have what she's having. And that, I think, is the exciting moment we can get to when we really use this technology to have these I'll have what she's having moments. A quick sidebar in my background, because I have a slightly unusual background for a cartoonist. I started drawing cartoons as a kid. How many of you have done this with Silly Putty? Yeah, so I fell in love with cartoons. I wanted to be a cartoonist when I grew up. These guys were my heroes. That's Bill Watterson from Calvin and Hobbes, Gary Larson from Far Side, and Berkeley Breathed from Bloom County. They were my biggest heroes growing up. They all quit cartooning when I was in college, which was traumatic. Funny enough, Berkeley Breathed has come out of retirement when he found out that Donald Trump was running for president, so you can find him on Facebook. But I wanted to be a cartoonist when I grew up, and I gave it up for a long time, and then found that love of cartooning back again when I ended up at Harvard Business School. It's not exactly a feeder school for cartoonists. But I started drawing cartoons again and then went into consumer products brand management. I was at General Mills, I was at Nestle, I was at Method. I spent time as interim chief marketing officer at a startup called Hotel Tonight. And so I've had a marketing career. But every week I've put out a weekly cartoon about marketing. And over the last almost 15 years, it's grown to 100,000 marketers a week who get this cartoon. And ultimately led me to take the leap 6 years ago and start a dedicated marketing agency that uses cartoons for content marketing. So now I work with cartoonists from the New Yorker and other places. So I share that just to give a perspective on where I'm coming at from this, both as a cartoonist and as a marketer. And what I want to do is walk through 6 ways I think we need to adapt as marketers, 6 aspects of this mindset change that I think we need to take full advantage of all of the technology you're learning about here today. And the first one is the idea that Don Draper is no longer in charge. Right? As much as I miss that show, the way that marketing happened in that era doesn't work the same way today. So one of the first brands I worked on was Green Giant. It's one of the classic advertising icons of the last century. And when I arrived at my desk at Green Giant the first day, I inherited this binder of all these brand materials, and one thing that was included was a creative brief literally written by a young Leo Burnett. And it was fascinating to see how they thought about the brand when they created it. And it was fascinating to me when I arrived at Green Giant at that desk, how little the mindset had changed. There was a fundamental assumption that you had a captive audience. You had, at the early days, just a few television stations to get your message across. You had basically a command and control style of marketing, where you defined your brand and then you had a few discrete channels to push your brand message out to, right? And this is what Seth Godin refers to as the TV industrial complex. It worked really well for a long time, but the trick is that nowadays we live in a world like this. Your ad ignored here. There's no such thing as a captive audience. The audiences we want to engage with can vary just as easily as it is for us with technology to reach them. It's as easy for them to just tune out the clutter, not pay attention to it. This pair is so perfect. I can't wait to buy them cheaper online somewhere. What's your Wi-Fi password? You don't even have a captive audience when they're in your store, and that's a fundamental change. Don Draper doesn't know how to thrive in a world like that, where the marketing landscape looks much more like this. Each one of these nodes and touch points is a way that people find out about your brands. And you can't possibly control all those nodes through a command and control style of marketing, where the marketers control the message, right? And that creates a lot of tension. So here's an example from a couple of years ago. Nutella, it's a beloved brand. This guy loves the Nutella brand. There's a woman in Italy who loved Nutella so much that on her own, she started World Nutella Day. She set up a Facebook page. She asked people to send in pictures of themselves. She collected all of these recipes on things you could make with Nutella. What do you think the parent company of Nutella did when they found out about her? They sent her a cease and desist letter, using the brand without permission. Not the right font, not the right logo. They basically shut it down. And what a missed opportunity. I support word-of-mouth marketing just as long as we tightly control exactly what they say. And I think that's a little bit of the tension that we're feeling as marketers. I want to share another example. How many of you have been to the state of Kentucky? So a few of you. There's a destination travel authority in pretty much every state, and they try to get people to visit their state. Kentucky has one. They wanted more people to visit the state of Kentucky, and so they decided to brand the state of Kentucky. And they wanted to make it interactive. They came up with this tagline called Unbridled Spirit. And then they set up a page asking people, what does unbridled spirit mean to you? It's not the most exciting tagline. If you Google unbridled spirit, you get a horse ranch in Texas. And so along come these two guys. They work in advertising. They live in the state of Kentucky. They thought unbridled spirit was kind of lame. And so on their own, they decided these two guys were going to rebrand the state of Kentucky. They came up with a tagline they liked a lot better. And then they traveled the state of Kentucky interviewing people about Kentucky Kicks Ass, asking people what that means to them. The guy in the bottom right, his job title is Turtle Man, whatever that means. But all these guys described what Kentucky means to them, and they got people talking. They developed their own creative. In Kentucky, there are more barrels of bourbon than there are people. Now, what do you think is going to get people more excited about Kentucky? But what do you think Kentucky thought about these guys who are coming along with the whole brand redefinition? We certainly would not sanction or endorse that phraseology. These guys are Kentucky natives and they love the state, but they have a different constituency, which is no one. So, these guys had a field day with that. The internet loves statements like that. Regardless of what Kentucky's tourism department says, we're rebranding the state. A grassroots movement is taking place, driven by proud Kentuckians, the internet's plural, and a little social media. And that's an incredibly exciting place to be. Right? And what a missed opportunity to throw a wet blanket on these guys, right? What's going to cause a greater reaction? That's the power of the community. That's the power of tapping into the community that gets inspired by brands. And the old school mindset doesn't work, doesn't know how to engage with that. So that mindset really has to fundamentally change. But it's not saying you totally give it away. We crowdsourced our financial services ad on the internet. If you crowdsource anything, sooner or later, it'll end up as a cat somehow. Hasbro had a contest to pick the next Monopoly piece, and the internet picked a cat. Justin Bieber's tour manager had a contest to pick his next tour location, and the internet picked North Korea. So, and many of you probably heard in the UK, they had a very serious scientific vessel. They had the internet with a contest to pick the name for this ship. What was the name of the ship that the internet picked? Bodie McBoatface. So it doesn't have to be total anarchy, and brands get really uncomfortable that that's what's going to happen if you let the community in just a little bit. But what I'm saying is that there's a place in between, and our mindset has to be more comfortable with taking our hands off the steering wheel and bringing the community more into what our brand stands for. And fundamentally asking the question, is our marketing worth sharing? Recognizing that there's a shift between who owns our brand, the brand manager on the left or the actual end consumer or customer on the right. And that shift has really happened. Okay, the second idea I want to share with you is the idea that technology can't save boring marketing, but it can amplify remarkable marketing. And that's an incredibly exciting place to be. As marketers, we love new technology. We love the shiny new thing. We need to stay focused on our marketing priorities and not get distracted by every shiny new, look, squirrel. And that happens a lot, right? The next thing comes along, and if we don't change our mindset, we don't take advantage of it. They haven't liked, friended, followed, fanned, shared, or plussed us, but maybe, just maybe, they'll pin us. Right? I want to share a quick example, one of my favorite marketing stories that is decidedly low tech, but is extremely high social. So how many of you have heard of the brand called Innocent? So a few of you. They're based in Europe. I came across them when I moved to London a few years ago, and at the time they were pretty small. And I did what a lot of you do when you go to new markets. I looked to see how marketing happened in that market. And I came across this brand, and I was wondering, how are all these bottles wearing hats? And the hats were really kind of quirky and different. And they had this really interesting promotion around it, that you would buy an Innocent smoothie at full price, and for every bottle you bought, you'd get a little woolly hat. And then 25p, about 50 cents, would go to this organization called Age UK that provided heating oil for the elderly in the winter. And as a marketer, I thought, that's just an amazing story to get this little hat, and then it goes to a good cause. And then I thought, where did they get all the hats? And then I realized all these quirky hats, which were all very different, were actually knitted by the actual consumers of this brand. And I was thinking as a marketer how hard it was to get consumers to do anything, to click on a code or fill out a form. And here they're getting people to knit hats, right? They had members of the royal family knitting hats. And it's not people benefiting from the charity, but also everybody can relate to this story. And so this little smoothie company is getting truckloads of hats arriving at their offices that they then filter and then put one on a smoothie bottle and then put it in their local grocery store. And I found that really remarkable. I found that amazing. And which bottle would you pick up? The backstory on this is that they were a young brand. Tropicana wanted their space and started going on deal on discount every other week. And this little brand couldn't afford to do it. So they came up with this woolly hat promotion as a way to do something that Tropicana couldn't. They realized that they couldn't out-Tropicana. And so they came up with this idea. And I find it really interesting. What's really amazing to me is that they measured it, and the lift was actually higher than if they just given the money off its shelf. And I think that's a remarkable thing on the power of the community. But you couldn't get more low-tech if you tried. They first did this promotion with nothing more sophisticated than an email newsletter. You have knitting and the elderly. You can't get much more low-tech than that. But I think that this idea is extremely social at the core. This is so Pinterest-ready, even before Pinterest existed. And so over time, as new technologies have come along, they've used those to amplify and extend the promotion. They've used them to get people excited about it further, developing interactive games. But the idea was innately shareable at the start. And I think more marketers need to come to ideas like that and then think about how the technologies can amplify those. Okay, the third idea I want to share is the idea that the best marketing doesn't feel like marketing. So often, we forget what it's like as actual consumers. We're wearing our marketing hat so carefully. We're thinking about the features and benefits of our products. We're forgetting about what it's like when you're actually the recipient of that marketing. I have new baby pics to share. I just got back from my reunion. Did you know that we have 7 subs under 6 grams of fat? If you're going to crash our newsfeed, at least make it interesting. And I feel so often we forget that. We forget that when something new, some new technology comes along, it becomes a way to tell our brand story, to just talk about our features and benefits. So I want to share an example of a technology that came along that was used in a very different way. So this is a robot called Chalkbot. It's capable of drawing chalk on a road surface, basically anything you want. As a marketer, it's ideal. You don't have any constraints of package size. You can literally write whatever you want. The road is your canvas. So Nike came across Chalkbot, and instead of drawing the world's longest Nike swoosh, they programmed Chalkbot so that it could receive messages of cancer support, and then they would draw that on the road surface as a physical artifact of that message. And then they would take a picture of it, tag it with GPS coordinates, and send that picture back to the person who provided the original message. And then they put it on the Tour de France. And the entire route of the Tour de France was nothing but these messages of cancer support. And what a powerful message. What an amazing message. But then you don't see the Nike swoosh, right? But if you came across this in any way, how would you feel about Nike? Their insight, it was that it wasn't about the bike, it wasn't about the shoe, it was about you, it was about the end audience. And I think that's a really good filter for any marketing. Is it about the audience? Is it enough about the audience? Or do we sound like this? But enough about me, what about you? What do you think of me? Right, which is the trick. We think sometimes as marketers, if you did a brain scan of our consumers, they would think about all sorts of things, but your brand would be in there. My husband, my kids, mom and dad. I don't see our brand of pickle relish anywhere. Right? And that I think is the missed thing. We have to think about ultimately where the consumer is. And that's important when new technologies come along like Vine. How do you tell a marketing story in 6 seconds? And then in the 5th second, we'd like to add a pack shot, show a product demo, and tag a local retailer promotion. So Lowe's came across Vine, and they decided to approach it very differently than just cramming a 30-second spot into 6 seconds. They came up with this really novel promotion that all it is are looping 6-second videos of little suggestive things on things you can do around your house. That's ultimately about problems you might have. If you have a screw that's stripped, you can use a rubber band. It just loops through that video. If you have scratches on a wood floor, you can use walnuts and rub those around on the scratches. If you have a snow shovel that's sticky, you can use cooking oil. If you have a table that has a water stain, you can use real mayonnaise. All these things you wouldn't know. And it puts Lowe's in a unique position of really understanding what the end consumers want. The brand is very much there, but it's not from a features and benefits perspective. And that, I think, is a really interesting filter. They then crowdsourced it, opened it up, and now they have all sorts of fix-it-in-6 videos supplied by their actual communities. And I find that really inspiring. Okay, the 4th idea I want to share is this idea of preaching to the choir. You all know the importance of super users, of talking to people who are very core to your brand. But a lot of brands think about marketing like this. Who else should we target? When I worked at General Mills, our chief marketing officer used to joke that every creative brief that crossed his desk looked like it was written for target audience, woman, age 18 to 49 with a pulse. And you can't be meaningful to anyone if you're trying to appeal to everyone, ultimately. You can create things that are ultimately a one-size-fits-all approach. Running, hiking, climbing, cycling, all in one. I drew this cartoon and I found this picture somewhere, but I don't know. But that's what your marketing turns into if you're trying to appeal to everyone. So I want to share an example of a brand that is very explicitly targeted towards super users and how that's been successful for them. So this is a brand called Sailor Jerry. How many of you know that brand? Great. Yeah, so they're one of the fastest growing spirits brands, but they're the little guy. They compete against Captain Morgan, brands with much deeper pockets than they have. Sailor Jerry is a spirits brand based on the legend of the guy on the right, the original Sailor Jerry. He was a famous tattoo artist from the 1940s. And they created this brand around his persona. Here's an example of a promotion that they had that was decidedly not for everyone. They found a place where there was a tattoo parlor next to a bar. There's probably a lot of those. And they had the idea for a promotion that if you were willing to get a tattoo of their brand permanently on your skin, they'd reward you with 1 shot of Sailor Jerry. It's not like a $1,000 prize or a cruise somewhere, 1 shot of Sailor Jerry. And look at all the people in that line. And there's an umbrella because it's raining. People literally showed up to get a picture, tattoos of this brand. And it's not people who you might think who already have a ton of tattoos, so what's another one? Sometimes in pretty prominent locations for this brand. But the amazing thing was, they didn't even have to send their own photographers to this event. Everyone took pictures of themselves and posted it. They created marketing that was so much for this core group of people who love the Sailor Jerry brand that created a movement. They interviewed somebody in line. It was on an NPR story, and I love this quote. "I'm in love with Sailor Jerry. All I drink is Sailor Jerry. You know what? A lot of people don't really understand, and I don't expect them to because Sailor Jerry is mine." It's kind of creepy, actually. But they knew that by appealing to somebody like this guy, Sebastian, they would appeal to a lot of other people who may not go to those lengths of actually getting a tattoo, but they connect with a brand that stands for something and that has super users like this guy who resonates with the brand and the brand resonates with him. And I think that's a real opportunity for a lot of brands, is to get hyper-focused on who you're reaching and who your core audience is. Okay, the next thing I want to share is the idea that customer service is the killer app. And this is so often overlooked by most brands. We've all had this experience. Your call is very important to us. Please hold while we evaporate all the goodwill created by our expensive advertising. That Gershwin song that United plays doesn't have the same associations for you once you've waited on hold for an hour as it does when they played it in their ads. But I think it's a reflection on how a lot of companies think about the customer. They spend a lot of time as marketers just wanting and hoping to drive engagement. But when you actually talk to somebody in charge of customer service, it's treated so much like a cost center. It's about how quickly can you end this interaction as quickly as possible. Great job keeping your average handle time so low. And a lot of people, I think, take this air horn approach, and that creates a real opportunity for brands willing to think about it differently. So I worked at a little upstart brand called Method, and I went to the UK. We didn't have a lot of resources, and we thought about how can our customer service be a form of marketing for us. The early days, we just had 3 of us in the UK, and we had our phone number printed on the actual bottles of the products that we sold. It would ring in our office, and this was the phone that would ring. And we would take turns actually talking to consumers. And we did this because we were poor, and we were trying to self-fund our launch there. But what it taught us, talking to consumers all day long, was remarkable. You know, the impact of actually talking to end consumers is such a phenomenal experience, to treasure each one of those interactions. We started doing our own in-store sampling, which I have to say works a lot better when you bring your family along, for people willing to talk to you. But it changed how we approached even our outbound marketing to make sure they were conversation and community-led. We didn't want to do the typical sampling team where they might have been sampling dog biscuits the day before and now they're doing your brand. So instead of that approach, we put an ad in the paper looking for performers who were acting in shows around London. And all these people showed up as if they were auditioning for a part. The guy in the bottom center is literally a Chippendales dancer. But for a 20-day period, he represented our brand, which is another good way to get engagement, I have to say, Chippendale dancers. But it taught us a lot about how to engage with audiences. And we were in the middle of the show, connecting with audiences, and across the aisle, I see somebody from a competitive brand just rapid stuffing samples into people's bags without making eye contact. And I feel like that's what happens if we're not careful. Our marketing turns into that. I had the chance to tour the Zappos campus a couple of weeks ago, and they have an award for who could stay on the phone the longest with a customer. The winner, 9 hours, 37 minutes. No joke. 9 hours, 37 minutes, 1 pair of Uggs. So you might ask this question, what's the ROI on that? Fortunately, not every call is like that, but symbolically, that type of thing sets a tone in the organization. That when you're engaging with a community, it's treated like a priority. And I feel like the modern mindset of marketing has to feel that way. And then you can take full advantage of all the technology that you have. This is a quote from Tony Hsieh, the founder. As unsexy and low-tech as it may sound, the telephone is one of the best branding devices out there. If you take that mindset and then put everything with Lithium and everything you've been learning about this conference behind it, it's tremendously powerful to do that at scale. The final idea I want to share is this idea of making your customers awesome and really channeling everything through that filter. There's a quote from a software engineer I like named Kathy Sierra who said, "It doesn't matter how awesome your product is, your awesome thing matters only to the extent that it serves the user's ability to be a little more awesome." Right? And so often it's like us so we can tell you how awesome we are. We are awesome, we are awesome. Awesome deal. Help our awesome video go viral. And not enough, how can we help you be more awesome? And that's what you guys do. Everything about this event is about that. And I want to close with one case study of a company that's doing this remarkably well. How many of you have heard of Betabrand? So a few of you. They're a pretty small company, but they're based in San Francisco. They sell clothing. They're competing against Gap and J. Crew, but they're doing it in a remarkable way. They don't have the deep pockets. They don't have the resources. They manufacture everything locally, so they can be really responsive. And their model is that they launch one new product every single week. Their idea is they're 1% fashion, 99% fiction is how they describe their brand. And so every week a new product comes out. For Thanksgiving, they launched the Gluttony Pants. These have extra buttons for Thanksgiving to get people talking about the brand. They decided to launch an article of clothing for each of the 7 deadly sins. This is the Lust skirt. It's made out of disco ball material. They made the Envy Pants. They made only one pair, and they sold it on eBay on auction model. These were the Preposterously Patriotic Pants. So they get people talking about the clothes, but what they found was remarkable is that people are wearing the clothes to say something about themselves. It was ultimately more about the community and how they felt about the clothes than the clothes themselves, the capron. When Mark Zuckerberg was going on his IPO roadshow, where everyone was making fun of the fact that he wore a hoodie, and they launched the executive hoodie. This dress may look pretty benign, but when you look up, you realize it's the little poo emoji. So all of these clothes are talk pieces. They see themselves in the conversation business, developing interactions with their community. But what was most amazing, they decided to completely re-engineer their website to showcase their community wearing their clothes. These pictures of these people wearing their clothes. They re-engineered it that if you supply an article of clothes, you get a discount code, but you also get a picture of yourself on their website with a dedicated URL you can send to all your friends, of yourself and your friends wearing these clothes. And what I find remarkable about this is it's not about the clothes, it's about what it says about these people. The brand is in effect helping people say something about themselves using aspects of the brand, right? And who wouldn't want to share this? And so this little brand with limited resources getting talked about. This guy is skydiving into Burning Man, which is an amazing feat, but particularly because he's wearing pants from this brand. And this brand is in effect there to make that kind of moment happen. And I want to close with this image by saying that that is exactly what you have the opportunity to do with the brands that you're associated with. Have the people in your community engage with your brand to this type of a degree so that your brand can go along for the ride. I've really enjoyed spending time with you today. Thank you so much.